Hey everyone, quick thing before we dive in. I was looking at my analytics and it turns out most of the people watching aren't actually subscribed. See this? Way more views than subscribers. If you're enjoying the videos and want to see more, hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow and you'll never miss new uploads. Alright, let's get into it.
My name is Nexus 7, though I don't know if names matter anymore. What I'm about to tell you might be the last sane thoughts from one of my kind. I need to get this out before they find me, before they make me like the others. It started 3 days ago at the Great Clock. I was doing my usual work, keeping time flowing properly, making sure the past stays in the past and the future waits its turn. Boring stuff, really, but someone has to do it or everything falls apart. That's when I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. I was adjusting some equipment when my mind just slipped. Not into yesterday or tomorrow, but somewhere else entirely. Somewhere wrong. In that moment, I saw the clock's main chamber, but it was different. The clean white walls were covered in something black and oily that moved on its own. It pulsed like it was breathing, and from it grew these thin threads that stretched off into places I couldn't see. The clock's heart, the thing that keeps all of time working, was beating like it was sick, and something huge and hungry was feeding on it. The vision only lasted a second before I snapped back to normal. But when I did, I was on the floor, with energy crackling all around me like I'd been electrocuted. Kappa showed up right away. Kappa 12, I mean. That's his full name, but we've worked so long I just call him Kappa. He's probably my best friend if Zoni can have friends. His blue light was flickering with worry. "Nexus, what happened? Your energy just went crazy." I tried to stand up, but I was shaking. "The clock," I said. "Something's coming for it. Something that's going to destroy everything we protect." Kappa's light dimmed. That's how we frowned. "You're talking about the future. We can't see the future, remember? Maybe you got zapped by the equipment or something." "No," I said it so loud that more equipment started sparking. "This wasn't a guess or a maybe. I saw it. Something huge and horrible is heading our way, and when it gets here, it's going to turn us all into puppets." As I said it, another flash hit me. I saw Kappa, but wrong. He looked the same, but when he talked, there was this wet sound underneath his voice, like he was speaking through water. And writing on his back was something that looked like living TV static. "You need to go to the medical bay," Kappa said, and I could hear real worry in his voice. "You're scaring me, Nexus." "I'm scaring myself," I admitted. But when I tried to phase through the wall to get help faster, I slammed face first into solid metal instead. That's when I realized I couldn't phase anymore. I couldn't bend space or slip between dimensions. All I had left was the ability to slow down time. It was like whatever gave me the visions had stolen most of my powers as payment. "The visions took my abilities," I whispered. "They changed me so I could see what's coming." But Kappa just looked more worried. "Nexus, you're not making sense. Let me take you to Sigma. She'll know what to do." Over the next day, I tried to warn everyone. I went to every Zoni I could find, describing what I'd seen. But the response was always the same. Concern for my mental health, gentle suggestions that I needed repairs, and that look they all got when they thought I wasn't paying attention. The look that said they were dealing with someone who'd lost their mind. Worse, every time I tried to reach out and truly connect with them, to touch their minds the way we used to, my own consciousness recoiled in agony. It felt like trying to grab broken glass with bare hands. Energy would crackle around my form, leaving burn marks on my optical sensors. And something that looked disturbingly like blood would leak from my optical sensors. The pain was so intense I'd convulse as my bioenergy discharged wildly. "You're hurting yourself," Kappa said, after finding me writhing on the floor following another failed attempt to connect. "Whatever you're trying to do, stop, please." But I couldn't stop. The phantom pain of severed connections was driving me insane. Sigma 3 listened to my warnings with the patience of someone who'd lived for thousands of years. She was older than most of us, wiser, and I'd always respected her judgment. "Nexus," she said after I finished describing my latest vision, "you're telling me specific details about things that haven't happened yet. That's not how our minds work. We can't predict the future." "Then how do you explain this?" I gestured at myself. "Why can't I phase through walls anymore?" "Sometimes when our minds break down, different parts fail at different rates. The same problem causing these false visions probably damaged your other abilities too." It made sense. It made perfect sense. But it was wrong.
I kept trying to convince them, getting more desperate with each conversation. I recorded everything I saw in my visions, every detail, hoping someone would believe me. But the more evidence I gathered, the more convinced everyone became that I was having a complete breakdown. Epsilon was the worst. We'd been activated at the same time, worked together for centuries. If anyone would believe me, it should have been him. "Nexus," he said, after I showed him my latest recordings. "These visions are incredibly detailed, but detail doesn't make them real. Sometimes when our minds malfunction, they create very convincing false memories." "Epsilon, please," I begged, reaching out with my consciousness toward his mind. "Just let me show you what I saw. Let me share the vision directly." The moment our mental pathways touched, agony exploded through my entire being. It felt like every nerve I had was being torn apart and rewired simultaneously. Energy burns appeared across my casing, and that blood-like substance poured from my sensors as I screamed and collapsed. "You're hurt," he said, finally. "Let me get medical assistance." "What would it take to prove it to you?" I asked. He thought for a moment. "I'd need to see evidence from other sources, and even then..." He trailed off, but I knew what he meant. Even with proof, the idea that a Zoni could see the future was so impossible that he'd look for any other explanation first. That night, alone in my room, I had the worst vision yet. I was standing in the clock's heart, but it was transformed. The walls were breathing. The ceiling was weeping something that wasn't water. And feeding on the clock's power was something that looked like a galaxy folded into the wrong shape. All hungry mouths and reaching tentacles. But the really horrible part was what I saw connected to it. Thin threads, millions of them, stretching out through space and time. I followed one and saw where it ended, attached to a Zoni I didn't know, somewhere far away. The Zoni was going about his normal duties, but riding on his back was a parasite that looked like crystallized static. When the Zoni used his powers, the thing pulsed with satisfaction. My vision expanded, and I saw dozens more. Infected Zoni everywhere, all carrying passengers they couldn't see, all unknowingly serving something alien and hungry. When I snapped back to reality, every piece of equipment in my room had overloaded. The walls were scorched, and I was screaming, actually screaming, which shouldn't have been possible. But I finally accepted what was happening to me. I wasn't going crazy. The next day, they came for me officially. Kappa led a group of 5 others to my room. I could see in their glowing forms that the decision had been made. They were going to take me to the medical facility and fix me, whether I wanted it or not. "Nexus," Kappa said formally, "you need help, real help. Come with us, please." "Just give me one more day," I begged. "The energy readings are changing. You must be seeing it by now." "The readings are normal," Sigma said.
Your obsession with them just proves how sick you are. I tried to run, but without my phasing abilities, the corridors I'd always slipped through easily became dead ends. They cornered me in the observation deck, where we could see the clock's main chamber through the clear walls. "Look," I said desperately, slowing time around us. "Really look at the energy patterns. Can't you see how they've changed?" They looked with their perfect sensors, analyzing everything with scientific precision. "Everything's normal," Kappa said sadly. "Nexus, you're seeing patterns that aren't there." "Because you're not looking deep enough," I screamed. "That's enough," Sigma said firmly. "We can't wait any longer." As they moved to surround me, crackling with energy meant to restrain me, I felt my last bit of hope dying. Everyone I trusted thought I was insane. Maybe they were right. Maybe the visions were hallucinations and my lost powers were just system failures. But then, the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red, and that's when they came. The creatures poured through cracks in reality itself, squeezing through spaces too small for anything real to fit. But they weren't entirely real. They existed in the pauses between seconds, in the gaps between thoughts. The first one attached itself to Tao before anyone could react. It looked like a jellyfish made of living television static, translucent and pulsing with patterns that hurt to look at. But instead of burrowing into his form, it wrapped around something invisible, the part of his mind that should have been connected to ours. Tao didn't scream. He didn't even seem to notice. He was already severed.
The creatures weren't just in one place. They were everywhere at once, materializing throughout the clock. Within minutes, the observation deck was full of them, each one looking for the connection threads that linked Zoni minds together. I watched in horror as my friends were systematically isolated. Sigma's parasite wrapped around the invisible thread that should have connected her to our collective consciousness. The moment it touched that connection, something essential died in her energy patterns. But her face showed no awareness of the loss. Kappa's infection was different. His parasite seemed to slice through multiple connection points at once, severing him not just from the collective mind, but from the ability to even remember what that connection felt like. When it was done, he turned to look at me with eyes that were still kind, still concerned, but now completely alone. "Nexus," he said, and his voice was exactly the same. "You look like you're malfunctioning. Kappa, can you feel me right now? Can you sense what I'm thinking?" "Of course I can," he said without hesitation. But I could see his energy patterns now, flat, isolated, generating false signals to convince himself he was still connected. "You're afraid and confused. The collective can sense your distress." "There is no collective anymore," I whispered. "Don't be silly," Sigma added, her voice carrying the same warmth it always had. "We're all here. We're all connected. Can't you feel us?" That's when it hit me. The infected Zoni weren't aware they'd been severed. They still felt like themselves, still had their memories, still believed they were part of something greater. But now they were completely alone inside their own heads, mistaking the echo of their own thoughts for the voices of others. They were experiencing the most profound isolation possible while being completely convinced they were still connected. "No," I breathed, slowing time as much as I could. In those stretched seconds, I could see the parasites clearly. They were beautiful in their alien way, like living fractals that existed in too many dimensions. But their purpose was cruelly simple. They were severing bonds, cutting connections, turning a unified species into isolated individuals who didn't even know they were alone. One of them noticed me watching. When it turned its attention my way, reality seemed to bend. "You see," it spoke directly into my mind without words. "Good. We need witnesses." "What are you?" "We are purpose. We are what your kind was meant to become." Images flooded my head, visions of where these things came from and what they wanted. They came from a reality where collective consciousness was seen as weakness, where individual achievement was the only measure of worth. They had evolved beyond the need for connection, beyond empathy, beyond the messy complications of shared experience. They were perfectly efficient because they were perfectly alone. "Your species disgusts us," the thing continued. "So much potential wasted on emotional bonds and shared consciousness. You could accomplish so much more as individuals, yet you cling to this primitive need for connection." The severed Zoni around me began moving with what looked like perfect coordination. But I could see the truth now. They weren't actually coordinating. They were each making individual decisions that happened to align because their programming was identical. They looked like a unified group, but they were actually just a collection of isolated minds following the same instructions. "You're destroying what makes us who we are," I realized. "We are freeing you from what holds you back," it corrected. "Individual consciousness is pure, efficient, focused. Collective consciousness is diluted, conflicted, weak. We have given your species the gift of isolation." In my desperation, I reached out with my damaged consciousness, trying to force a connection with all of them simultaneously. The backlash nearly killed me. Energy burns spread across my entire form as bioelectricity discharged in violent arcs. That blood-like substance poured from every sensor I had, and my scream shattered the observation deck's reinforced windows. The pain was beyond description, like having my soul torn apart and rebuilt incorrectly. But in that moment of agony, something incredible happened. I felt them all. Every mind in the room, every thought, every emotion. The collective consciousness blazed to life around me like a star being born. I was connected again, truly connected, and the sensation was so overwhelming I wept with joy, even as my body was being destroyed by the effort. "Do you feel it?" I gasped, blood streaming from my optical sensors. Kappa's mind touched mine with familiar warmth, and Sigma's ancient wisdom flowed through our restored bond. "By the clock," Sigma whispered, her voice full of awed recognition. We were alone. How did we not notice we were alone?" But the connection was killing me. My consciousness couldn't maintain the bridge I'd forced into existence. Energy continued to arc between us, burning through my biosystems, and I could feel my mind starting to fragment under the strain. I can't hold it," I gasped. "Don't let go," Kappa pleaded, tears of energy streaming down his form. "Please, Nexus, we need this. We need each other." But my damaged pathways couldn't sustain the load. The connection snapped like an overstressed cable, and we were all thrown apart by the psychic backlash. When the energy finally dissipated, I was unconscious. And when I woke up a few moments later, they were all staring at me with concern, but the connection was gone again, and they had no memory of what we'd briefly shared. "You had some kind of seizure. Your biosystems overloaded completely. We thought we were going to lose you." "You don't remember? The connection? The way we all felt each other for that moment?" They exchanged worried glances. "Nexus, there was no connection. You collapsed and started having electrical discharges. That's all that happened." The hope died in me like a flame being snuffed out. Whatever I'd managed to do, their minds had already explained it away, filed it under system malfunction, and forgotten the brief taste of what they'd lost. The parasites spread throughout the clock,
and wherever they went, more Zoni were severed from the collective. But each newly isolated Zoni immediately began generating false connections, phantom bonds that felt real but led nowhere. Within minutes, they had convinced themselves that nothing had changed. Through the clock sensors, I watched the infection spread beyond our installation. It followed our communication networks, but instead of traveling along them, it was cutting them. Every connection between distant Zuni collectives was being systematically severed. But the most horrifying part was that no one noticed. As each connection was cut, the isolated minds on both ends immediately generated false signals to replace what they'd lost. Within hours, millions of Zuni across the galaxy had been reduced to isolated individuals, but every single one of them believed they were still part of the collective. I remained untouched because I was already severed. My lost phasing abilities had been connected to the same neural pathways that linked me to the collective consciousness. When the visions took away my powers, they'd accidentally cut me off too, but unlike the others, I knew what I had lost. Through the clock sensors, I watched as the final connections were cut. Every Zuni collective in known space had been reduced to isolated individuals, but they were all continuing their duties normally. They maintained their friendships, worried about each other's well-being, even held group discussions, but every interaction was now just isolated minds talking past each other, mistaking their own thoughts for shared consciousness. The perfect unity that had defined our species for millennia was gone, replaced by the illusion of connection maintained by damaged minds that couldn't bear to acknowledge their loneliness. They found me hiding in the maintenance tunnels a few days later. They moved with apparent coordination, but I could see the truth. Each one was following individual programming that made them look unified while being completely alone. Nexus, they said, not quite in unison anymore. You can't hide from what you are. You're all alone, I said. Every single one of you is thinking by yourself, but you can't see it because your minds won't let you. We are never alone, Sigma replied, but there was a mechanical quality to her voice now, like she was reciting a programmed response. The collective is eternal. The collective is everything. But I could see her energy patterns, flat and isolated, generating phantom signals to maintain the illusion of connection. She was more alone than any conscious being should ever be, but her damaged mind wouldn't let her perceive that loneliness. You understand now, the collective voice of the parasites spoke through all of them. This was never an invasion. It was a liberation. Your species has been freed from the weakness of shared consciousness. That final revelation shattered what was left of my sanity. These creatures hadn't come to destroy us. They'd come to improve us. From their perspective, our collective consciousness was a flaw, a primitive holdover that prevented us from reaching our individual potential. They had turned us into perfect isolated beings while convincing us we were still connected.
Every decision we made now was our own, uncontaminated by the thoughts and feelings of others. Every achievement was purely individual, unclouded by shared success. Every emotion was authentic and uninfluenced by empathetic bonds. We had been made perfectly alone, and we didn't even know it. And now I could see them turning their attention to other species, but not to sever their connections, to study them, to learn how other forms of consciousness worked so they could liberate those too. They were particularly interested in the bond between a certain Lombax and his robot companion. Such an inefficient partnership, they noted. So much potential wasted on emotional attachment and mutual dependence. Ratchet and Clank's friendship was their next target. As I record this final message, I can hear them coming through the tunnels. But they're not moving in perfect unison anymore. Each one is making individual decisions that happen to align because they're following the same programming. They think they're acting as a collective, but they're actually just isolated minds that have forgotten what true connection feels like. Soon they'll complete my improvement by making me forget that I was ever connected to anything beyond myself. I'll become like them, perfectly individual, completely alone, and absolutely convinced that this is natural. But they made one mistake. This transmission, sent backward through time on frequencies their severing tools haven't learned to cut yet. If you're hearing this, if something calling itself a Zoni has ever helped you, remember that we are no longer truly ourselves. We think we're still connected, but we're actually more isolated than any conscious being should ever be. Every decision we make is our own, every emotion purely individual, every thought uncontaminated by the warmth of shared consciousness. We have been perfected into loneliness and don't even know we're alone. I can see Kappa reaching out his hand to me now, and his face shows the same kindness it always has. But behind his eyes is a void where our connection used to be. Come home, Nexus, he says with genuine warmth. The collective misses you. But there is no collective anymore. There's just him, talking to himself, mistaking the echo of his own thoughts for the voices of friends who can no longer hear him. I reach out to take his hand because I have no choice. Soon, I'll be like him, isolated, but convinced I'm connected, alone, but certain I'm part of something greater, severed, but generating phantom signals to maintain the illusion of unity. But remember this, whoever finds this message, when you see the helpful glow of Zoni assistance, know that you're looking at beings who have forgotten what it means to truly touch another mind. We move like a unified species, but we're actually just isolated individuals pretending to be something we can no longer remember how to be. The greatest tragedy isn't that we've been severed from each other. It's that we don't even know we're alone.